Hi, my name is Lucy Huxley. I'm a whore, and welcome to my bedroom. Today, I am joined by the amazing Bishop Black.
Hello.
Bishop Black is a multidisciplinary stage, burlesque, and porn performer. Hailing from London, they currently reside in Berlin. They've been active in the porn scene for over 10 years and have worked with directors and studios such as Bruce LaBruce, Erika Lust, HardWerk, JoyBear, and more. They have recently starred in the film The Visitor, which premiered at the Berlinale this year.
That's right.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
On this beautiful winter day.
Yes, it snowed today for the first time in Berlin
I
for
know.
the season.
I
Yeah.
know. Wasn't ready. Was not ready.
Thank you for making the trek to go outside and come here.
Anytime.
So you have quite an impressive resume for someone working in porn. It's quite rare, I think, for someone to be in this industry for so long. And you're also incredibly prolific. I remember a couple months ago, I was doing research for my episode about porn, looking at different porn websites to recommend to people to watch porn on.
As you do.
Yes, of course. And every single one that I checked to recommend, you were on the front page. There's Bishop. Oh, there's Bishop.
It's start having bingo cards for it.
Can you find Bishop Black? I've worked with you, so I have a bit of experience. I think I have a little bit of understanding of why you have done so much work, because you're really great to work with, very easy to work with. It's an enjoyable experience.
Thank you.
You're super attractive. And also, for some reason, it's very difficult to find reliable and nice and not weird male-bodied people in porn. So that's why I think you've done so much work. But I want to hear from you about like why you are so prolific, why you have the career that you have. What are the different things that contribute to that?
Maybe for one, being able to be covered in mud and to dance in a rice field in Catalonia for no reason. And be called a mud person.
Yeah, being able to put up with shit like that. Yeah, for people who don't know, Bishop and I performed together in a film called Mud Dance that involved exactly what you just said, being covered in mud. I think it was like 7 degrees outside, and we were filming outside, being covered in wet mud.
That's true. But the thing was, it was 15 degrees when the sun was out.
Yeah, but we started shooting at 7 a.m.
It's true. But then the thing was is that every time there'll be a gust of wind, that's when it dropped and became like 7 degrees.
It was so windy. And we actually had to stop the sex scene like partway through because my teeth were chattering. That's never happened to me before.
No. I think, what can I say? I mean, I must say that I was very fortunate to be involved or get into the porn scene when I did, because at the time I started working within the adult industry. So I guess like for me, it wasn't just working in film, but also working in glamour modeling and nude modeling and stuff like that for artists and so on. I was about 19 when I first started doing that.
Okay.
So that was in London, and I'd always been like open to try new things and to explore new things. And eventually I did my first film in London when I was 23. And that was like straight into the deep end. It was this gay BDSM porn scene, which was like hardcore BDSM. And it was like, for a first film, it's not quite typical to do that.
Yeah, to jump straight into the hardcore BDSM thing.
Exactly. And it was really intense. Like at one point I'm like hanging from like my ankles from the ceiling, being like hit with ping pong rackets.
Wow. And what made you want to do that?
I guess I'm a bit of a thrill seeker. And I think when I was younger, I was much more of a thrill seeker, and I wanted to just try new things, explore new things. I knew that from the point that I came out as bisexual when I was 17, and I didn't see people like me in magazines, or I guess you have these uber hyper-masculine men with these big muscles and like big tits and everything and big dicks. And at the time, I wasn't that. And I don't see myself as somebody who has a big dick. I just literally don't have like that type of body for it at the time. So I thought, okay, I want to show myself to the world and be like, hey, look, there are other people who are able to be in like this, in this type of medium. And I wanted to lead the path, if you will, for people who will come later on and be like, okay, well, I see somebody who I can relate to. So when I moved to Berlin, I was working a lot with like drag and burlesque, and I happened to come across a director called Morgana Muses, and then that turned into having My Cake, which was one of my favorite films.
I've seen that film. I remember it. It's so nice.
I was so happy, first of all, with the makeup and the whole look. And then we were shooting in France and macaroons and sugar highs and everything. And it was also like, there were so many different things that really ticked all the boxes of what I really enjoy. So playing around with age play, playing around with gender, doing some fun little BDSM bits and pieces. And then it was a really beautiful hot sex scene. So that was really cool. And it gave me the chance to actually show that I'm a performer and I have artistic suggestions that can be like you're taken into film. And I mean, I think the biggest thing I can say, because obviously as a porn performer, you always feel that you have to compete against other people, and I'm not immune to that. There are times that I feel that I could be doing more in terms of my own field, in terms of like my own work, in terms of looking at or comparing yourself to other people and being like, oh, well, that person's doing this, but I haven't got this, or I haven't got an award and I've never been seen or appreciated for my work. And it's a lot of this like negative like narratives that really do whole loop through your head. I think what you said about having reliability is incredibly important. And I also realized that that was something that is very rare. It's true what you say, like there are not a lot of, at least in Europe, in the European scene, there are not a lot of reputable, trustworthy male performers out there who can be like able to shoot with a lot of people and a lot of people can feel comfortable with, and also reliable in their own way. And I'm not saying that like I'm perfect, there have been times I've also fucked up, but I've always tried to learn through my mistakes and then basically just try to be as relaxed in the environment as I possibly can do. There are obviously things I don't do in terms of my work, and also the people who don't choose me, because at some point I came to the realization that because I am some way niche, there are like niche concepts to me, being bisexual, having the field of work that I have. A lot of people would choose not to work with me because that can also affect their work there. I mean, I don't know how it is nowadays, but I remember when I first started in the scene, I was already pretty much aware of that from the get-go. That some people will not want to work with you because you are a bisexual porn actor. And that basically means that your chances are limited. So what you have to do is just find your own way of showing your expression. I think a lot of it came down to luck as well. I was lucky to work with Erika Lust. I was lucky to be in Berlin and have so many people who wanted to work with me, which then also built up my own portfolio. And then also I was lucky to have the ability to showcase my personality in some way, shape or form through Bishop Black. So it wasn't just this person who's going out and just doing a gonzo scene and then just going off home. Like I didn't want that. And I think it was also for me, I wouldn't feel particularly fulfilled by that. I don't mind doing them. I mean, all this work and you got to work, you got to make the bag. But I said this to somebody else the other day because they were surprised that I was still doing quite a lot of queer indie independent stuff, which sometimes is quite low paid or it's a no budget thing. And I'm like, well, if the script is interesting to me, if there's like something that I can draw from and I'm like, okay, this is something that calls to me, I would rather do that, but I would also have to make sure that I can pay my rent and have groceries on the table the next day or something. So I will probably do a big scene with a big company, or I'll find work through my stage work or my performance work, and that will give me the ability to do the things I actually want to do. And I think having the freedom to work with either new performers or new studios or doing something that's very experimental but different, but like also low paid, gives me the freedom to feel like I'm actually showing myself as a performer.
So you get that like reward and gratification from being able to express yourself through this work.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess I would imagine that's also a contributing reason to why you've been in the industry for so long. If it's still rewarding and gratifying for you, it's not just a job, it's not just something to make money for a little bit of time, it's like actually something that you're really passionate about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also important to be very mindful of yourself when it comes to your energy levels. When you reach a point where you just can't do it and you need to have a break, sometimes it's difficult to say, you know what, I can't do this, I need a break. And I think the last time that happened to you was actually in 2019. And I was like, I think it was December, and I was like, yeah, I need to take a break. I think I'm actually burnt out. This is actually taking a lot out of me. Little did I know that the universe had some plans.
Yeah, and in 2019, you're actually going to take a little break. Everything's going to be fine. Yeah, because I guess especially when you feel passionate about this type of work, you have to give a lot of yourself to it. Like physically and emotionally, porn is very taxing.
No, of course. And I really commend people who are able to have that distinction. Like they're able to have this persona on camera And then when they're away from the camera, they're able to like live their normal life, and they have this very strong and sharp boundary of, no, I'm not going to give anything more than what this persona is. And I think that's something that can be very challenging for a lot of people, but I feel like it's also something that's a good way to take care of oneself. I've never been that type of person. I've always tried to have a part of me within the work that I do. And that's just another way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It isn't better or worse. I think sometimes in these conversations of authenticity, we talk about like, oh, it's better if someone is passionate about the work they're doing, or it's like, it's better if like they're authentic in porn. But being authentic is actually just a different type of labor. Like it can make it more difficult. It can make the work harder. And some people like you and me as well prefer this authenticity, but that doesn't mean it comes without its negatives. Like sometimes I wish, like you, that I was someone who just had a different persona, shut it off, because I think that does make it easier in some ways, and it doesn't make the work any less valuable necessarily.
No, exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on what you mentioned earlier about biphobia in porn, because this is something I didn't discover until I started working in porn myself. Like I was completely oblivious to it, and then I started working in porn, and people were like, "Oh yeah, like bi guys are like not a thing in porn, and people don't work with bi men." And I was like, wow. Because it's such a double standard. Like that doesn't happen with women, obviously. Yeah. For women who work in porn, the standard is that they do scenes with both men and women. That's the standard. But if you're a man or male-bodied working in porn, it's actually really difficult to do both types of scenes. Most performers either work with women or they work with men. And if they do work with both, some performers actually will say, some female performers say that they do not work with male performers who also work with men.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And this is a very big can of worms, because obviously there has been a lot of discussion about this in the past, which led to some unfortunate situations that happened in the scene. But this is a thing that has gone on for as long as I've been working within the industry. And I think that's basically a reflection of society as a whole. It's relationship to bisexuality with male-bodied or men. It's male-bodied people or basically cis men. So, I mean, this was something that like I had to take into consideration when I first started to work in the scene, and I had to make an oath to myself, basically, not only for that, but also working with porn. It's a thing that I haven't experienced personally, in the sense of I've not been on a set, for example, and then somebody has decided to turn around and be like, actually, I just heard that you fuck guys. I'm okay. That's luckily never happened to me. I know it's happened to a lot of other people, which is completely crazy, but I mean, it's always been something that's been in my mind. I've always been prepared to be in a situation where maybe there's going to be a scene that's going to be set, or I'm going to work with somebody and then at the last minute they decide not to work with me. And I think that's also the reason why I've never been so geared towards the mainstream scene for a long time, because I knew that I wasn't welcome there for a long time. And I mean, that's also kind of partly to it, because, you know, that sometimes, like, similar with tattoos, I'm not trying to equate sexuality with tattoos, but there are so many preferences that people have. And unfortunately, if you are somebody who, like me, has a very distinct type of look or distinct type of body of work, then sometimes I feel, and this is probably my own feeling, that it's hard for people to kind of see outside of that, other than, oh, you are Bishop, and Bishop comes with all this extra light type of energy. But on the other side, obviously, it comes down to a simple thing of like stigma regarding STDs and trying to be on top of our best sexual game, because we know how people will basically use that against us. Similarly with sex workers, like full service sex workers who also work within the industry, they also have a very big stigma attached to them as well, because, oh yeah, but you know, you do full service sex work. I don't want to work with somebody who wants full service sex work. I'm like, yeah, but you have sex in your real life, right? Yeah. And sometimes you can't tell who've got tested the last week.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy to me, because porn is a fantasy, right? At the end of the day, we're like creating a product for people to view, and it's a fantasy. It can be based in reality, but it's not inherently reality. And as a consumer of porn, I think it's important to be aware of that. Any porn performer that you watch could be doing anything.
Well, yeah.
When you're more.
Exactly.
And you don't know. So it's crazy to me that the biphobia is so strong that it would even affect people in that way.
I think it's changed. Like I said, I think it's changed a lot, and there are a lot of people who've really taken strides to show bi men having beautiful sex scenes and actually have a demand. Wolf Hudson is a great example. He's created his own studios and that did a lot of work regarding bi scenes with other people, and he gets a lot of praise for it. And I'm really happy that Wolf is in the general sphere because, yeah, without him, I don't know like how people will progress. I think there's other people like Dante Cole, who's also really great. You got Dylan Diaz, but that's also from the American side. And then from the European side, I mean, yeah, there's Noir Soul, there's me. I guess Sylvan is now, Sylvan G is also, and also Belgris as well. But I feel it comes a lot to the consumer's shift of perception or perspective when it comes to appreciating or enjoying bi work and actually having the confidence enough to say, yes, I want to see more of this. And I think I've seen a lot of people who I've imagined, like Sylvan, for example, we worked together on Dirty Martini Sex Party, and I wasn't even thinking that we were going to have a scene together because we were going to interact with each other, because I'm like, no, Sylvan's straight. That's crazy. I mean, I'm not Sylvan's not going to make out with me. That's ridiculous. And then Sylvan makes out with me, and I feel like, I don't know if they caught this, what I imagine my face must have been, but it was complete Pikachu face. It was complete Pikachu face. He just kissed me and I was like, completely flustered me because I didn't expect that to happen. So I think that there are people who are actually like going into exploring or like expressing other types of fluidity with their sexuality with the knowledge that like, yeah, I'm going to take a risk. And some of these people do have more of an extensive backwork of work, or they worked with the industry for such a long time. So they have less fucks to give, I guess, because they've already been like established. So I think for newer performers, it's a bit more difficult. But then I guess at the same time, it feels a bit strange because we're in a very pivotal moment regarding how porn is evolving and how we consume porn, as well as how performers actually express themselves with OnlyFans or other clip sites. And I think that then opens this Pandora's box of opportunities in some way. That being said, sometimes it can also be seen as a fad. So then you always have your peaks and your valleys.
Yeah, as performers, we do have a lot more freedom nowadays to create our own content and profit from our own content and do things the way that we want. But I hope it lasts. Like with all social media platforms, with all websites and things like this, they go in trends, like you said. But I'm also curious, you've been working in the porn industry for so long. I'm not friends with anyone else who's been working longer than you. And so I'm curious, what are some of the overall changes that you've seen in the industry since you started working, like for better or for worse?
I guess if we look at what's better, I think a lot of protocols that have existed within alternative, queer, or dare I say ethical film scenes have also then jumped over to certain mainstream companies. So you'll have people having more of these consent talks or boundary talks. I remember one person ages ago who works more in the gay scene was surprised when I showed my STI test to him because I'm like, yeah, but that's what we do. And he was really pleasantly surprised about that because I think it wasn't something, I know personally from when I started working in the gay scene, the Cats of Film, it wasn't like something that was heavily demanded, I felt.
So you weren't even required to have STD tests before shooting?
I mean, it wasn't that you weren't required to have STD tests. I think it was just more like they would assume that you would have your tests done.
So you wouldn't have to show it to anybody necessarily. Okay. Wow.
I don't think it's been like that for every gay porn scene I've been in, but like definitely a few that they don't care. The idea is that you are taking responsibility for your own bodily health, and therefore, if you're actually partaking in this particular film, then it's assumed that you've already taken care of all manners, and you're like taking therapy and not like positive without actually declaring, and you're undetectable if you are positive and so forth. There are obviously exceptions. I think the second thing, obviously, if we're going to talk about ethical, we have to talk about the way that porn has definitely taken like a leap forward in terms of quality. And on one hand, yeah, you have like companies like Erika Lust to thank for that, although there are other people before that who already were pioneering and spearheading this type of work. The negative side of that is that as a result, we have these fads that do come up. And one of the most recent fads, I think, is sexual wellness. And with this idea of sexual wellness, there comes this feeling of sanitizing pornography. in that the dirty stuff that porn is basically very much aligned with is kind of moved awareness more like, yeah, but how can we as people enjoy sexuality in a way that, and using these particular type of ethical terms and like using these things like consent talks and so forth and expressing your like sexuality and so forth, it's great. I think it's perfect. I think it's really lovely that we are having the capabilities to talk more openly and honestly about what turns us on as people. On the flip side, that can then get commercialized and then sanitized and then seen as something that's basically flat, because porn is still porn. Sex is still sex, and you can't sanitize something and make it acceptable for a mainstream audience in that particular manner.
A lot of this sexual wellness stuff, and even so-called ethical porn to some extent, it actually uses a lot of anti-porn rhetoric in order to advance itself. It's like aligning itself as, oh, we're not like regular porn. We don't have all of the things that society has problems with about regular porn. We're better. It's stepping on so-called regular porn, stepping on mainstream porn in order to be like above it, to assert itself as we're different, which does a disservice because we're not solving the fundamental issue of like why so many people view porn so negative.
And I was part of that as well. I remember talking in front of people and being like, yeah, this ethical porn is like this, or we're so different because we've got this and this and this. And I was feeding into that particular narrative because I just thought, I mean, yes, I've been in the scene for a while, but then at the same time, like finding out about ethical porn, finding out about feminist porn, and like really going into this particular direction and being like, yeah, because like this and this. And yeah, it's great that all these things happen, but we're a very small bubble. And I feel, like you said, championing on the sister scene, which is the mainstream scene, and being like, yeah, but the mainstream scene is like this and this. Like, yeah, there are a lot of like issues that do need to be like worked upon in terms of performer safety, better payment, and so forth. And there could be like a litany of like things that could be discussed. But the main thing is that the people who work within the industry should be the ones who discuss that, not from an outsider point of view and being like, oh, we're not like them. It's ridiculous because, as you said, at the end of the day, there's another person who's outside of this whole porn scene being like, you hoe. Like completely judging us, completely saying, yeah, well, you're nasty, you're this, you're that, and we'll find ways to ban us. And it's happened and it's happening and it continue to happen.
Yeah, we're much stronger if we actually band together. I've said it. I'm not like those mainstream performers. I'm not like those mainstream directors even. With the terminology, they're talking about like ethical or feminist porn. Those terms alone imply that mainstream porn is not ethical and that it's not feminist, which I think is problematic as well to imply that. So you've done a little bit of work in mainstream porn as well as more like queer, feminist, or ethical.
How to say like queer or independent?
Okay, queer independent. Yeah, I think that's a good descriptor. I feel like it's so tricky to figure out what words to use. So many people talk about it just as ethical porn, but I don't really like the term. I find it's too loaded. But what have been the main differences in your experiences working on mainstream sets versus working on queer independent sets?
It depends what set you work on, especially when it comes to more queer independent sets. I think there's a lot more freedom in terms of what's expressed sexually. So there's not really so much of a framework in terms of, okay, we're going to do this scene now, then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And then we're going to do the softcore version, and then do this and do this.
Yeah, there's a very specified shot list. Yeah. And like positions.
Yeah. There's obviously there's how many different films happening in one day, perhaps with that mainstream company, and they have to make sure that they have the game plan, which makes complete other sense. Another thing I would say as well, which might be a bit different now, but like when I was working with certain queer studios, for example, the idea would be you have to be into your co-performer. If you're not into your co-performer, that's going to show on screen. And as a result, that won't be sellable. People won't be convinced by your interaction with each other. So the most optimal situation in a queer scene is that both performers come onto the stage or come onto the screen. They're working with each other. They're so into each other, and you can really feel how well they're into each other, and the chemistry is palpable. You can just sit there and just be like all a flush, and it's just really beautiful. And it's not that it doesn't exist within mainstream scenes, but there are times where you're going to work with somebody that maybe you don't have that same sort of like connection with. And it happens because it is essentially our work. So there'll be times when you have a scene partner and you might see them in pictures and you're like, oh yeah, they're so beautiful. Oh my God, I would love to work with them. And then it comes onto the set And the chemistry just isn't there.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't happen the same way that you would actually hoped. But you still have to do the scene. Otherwise, you're going to waste that. You're going to lose your money. You're going to waste their time. And sometimes you just have to buckle down and just do it. And that's one of the things I would say definitely is a very big difference. Obviously, like, budget is another thing. Depending on how resourceful a queer scene can be, sometimes it can be very lo-fi in comparison with other mainstream scenes, which would be like, let's go to Barcelona. Let's shoot in this beautiful villa. And I'm like, oh my God. I don't remember the last time I actually flown out for a scene. This year, maybe not.
Would you please fly to Chabot for a scene?
Please, yes. I would love that. I mean, obviously, set locations are very different. There's also like a lot more people on a mainstream set in comparison to a queer set. A queer set could be a lot more intimate. Could be like literally 2 people on the scene, up to maybe maximum 8 or 9. Whereas like a mainstream scene will have like a DOP, a second AD, somebody helping in DOP, lights, sound, a runner, makeup, and so many other things. Exactly.
Assistance.
And maybe you'll have an intimacy coordinator, because I mean, that's now, I think that's happening a lot with mainstream cinema or with mainstream porn, for example, that intimacy coordinators now seem to be on set as well, which is fantastic for new performers, but it's also great for more established performers to know that there's somebody there in case something might happen with the director and the performer that can't be properly expressed. Mm-hmm. So I think the advent of like intimacy coordinators is fantastic. And I think that, yeah, a lot of people don't really understand why it's needed, but I think it's just a nice safeguard to have, basically.
Yeah, to have one specific person whose job it is to facilitate conversations between performers and to be a point of contact for performers if something goes wrong. And it's really nice to have that on set. And I think in my experiences working in more like independent feminist porn, when I started doing it 7 years ago, the term intimacy coordinator wasn't a thing, but they would be called talent managers. So on the bigger sets, there would be someone who was called a talent manager, and they would mostly fulfill the role that an intimacy coordinator does now. So they would be the one who was there to help us if we needed anything and kind of facilitate discussions. And it's nice that it's become a much more prevalent role and a more normal thing to have on set, because
Agreed.
I think it is really nice. On smaller sets, I've had experiences where the director takes on that role because they have a smaller budget, there's less people on set, so the director has to do a lot of things. So the director will be the intimacy coordinator, talent manager. And there definitely is a difference. It's obviously still helpful to have the director facilitating those things, but it's a big difference because you can't just go to the director to talk about anything because they're busy. They're directing the whole thing. And it's really nice to have a specific person on set that you can talk to about anything.
Exactly.
You also mentioned budget in porn. But I wanted to touch on that on the payment side, especially because it's a big misconception that porn pays really well. I made a TikTok a couple months ago talking about what I've been paid for doing porn scenes, which is like between 600 and 1,000 euros per scene. And people were very shocked. People were like, oh, I thought you would be getting at least 10,000 per scene.
10,000?
Yeah.
10,000?
Yeah, oh, I wish. And we also don't get any residuals.
Yeah.
Which is awful. In my opinion, TV actors get residuals for when their movies or series are shared in other places, and we never see any of that. And I would argue that it's actually more important for foreign actors to receive residuals. What's your experience with that then? I mean, I know that a general question. I don't know if you're like willing to share specific numbers about payment or just how it's been for you making a living or not making a living from doing porn for so long.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things that a lot of studios are trying to do as a way to go around this residual thing is to implement an affiliate scheme.
Yeah, so the performers get like a cut of people who sign up to the website, basically.
Yeah. Obviously, that still means that we would have to do the work.
Yeah, we still have to do the work of marketing it. So it's nice that some studios are offering that now, but it's not the same as residuals.
But that is definitely one thing. I'm not always great with that, I must say, because I feel like I'm not a person who likes to sit in front of the computer for hours on end doing that type of work.
Yeah, marketing and social media is a completely different job from porn.
Yeah. But in terms, I mean, obviously that's now one of the things that we have to put into our transferable skills, like marketing and social media, especially if you have an OnlyFans account. And even OnlyFans, I feel is a misconception as well, because unless you're like grinding at that on a daily basis and know how to do, well, kind of work with the whole sort of like gameplay of that basically, because it is essentially knowing how the system works and then also utilize it in a way that works for you. But then it's also quite skewed in terms of who's the people who get like the most bang and what things you have to do in terms of getting at least people to be interested. I know a lot of my fans, for example, they want to see a lot more scenes of me bottoming, which is fine, but it's not just the only thing I do. So when I start to show other things, then I'm like, okay, maybe it hasn't got the same sort of reception as to if I do a scene when I'm being fucked and people are like, oh yeah, I love it when Bishop gets back. Somebody actually even said that as well. They were like, yeah, I think it was like a gangbang scene I put up with 3 other performers. And this guy was like, yeah, I mean, I like it more when Bishop Black is getting fucked. I mean, he's just better that way. And I'm like, wow, right in front of my salad. Right in front of my goddamn salad. From the more studio side of things, it really depends from studio to studio. I think with mainstream, it's difficult because it comes down also to being able to negotiate your payment, but some people don't like that. And also being established in a particular way. Like I'm established in a particular way, but not in a mainstream way. Like in terms of mainstream, I feel like I'm seen as niche basically. So I've worked on shoots that have been 300 for a scene. And then I've worked on shoots that are maybe up to 1,200. It also depends how many days you'd have to shoot as well. Some scenes have been maybe 5 days and then it's like a base level of 600 euros or something, which is okay, but it's also like, how many hours are you working for the day, basically? There's some scenes, I think I had a shoot that was a grand, basically, in Rotterdam, but we shot for like 12 hours. And it was like, I think 1 or 2 of them were done. So it really, it's not so common to get more than, I mean, you may be able to get like 1,000 something as a performer, depending on your popularity. If you are somebody who has a very high visibility in terms of like your popularity or social status, then on social media, then you would probably get at least like 2 grand for a scene. But that in itself is an ultimate situation.
Yeah, that's the exception.
Yeah.
Have you ever been able to make a living from doing porn full time? Or
no, God, no.
Like
what?
Getting paid? What? So you've always had a second job, basically.
Multiple.
Yeah, at least one. At least 2.
Yeah, like I work in the stage, I work in like clubs doing performances. I also work a day job. So most of it is in the artistic sphere, and actually it's nice to have other jobs because it reminds me to stay humble. Working in the bar from this time to this time and being like, yeah, I'm still humble. Like I had to remind myself that I'm not all that. It's crazy. I know that sounds like ridiculous, but like sometimes you just need to come back down to work. And I don't know. I mean, again, I could probably make this full time, but also it takes a certain resolve to make this a full-time living. And I know there are people who do this on a full-time basis and they like have a whole bunch of material and they do a lot of shoots and they're able to make it work for them. And I'm like, that's great. I get tired after 1 or 2 shoots in a day.
Yeah, to do it full time, you really have to hustle constantly. And also to do it full time, you have to be a bit less picky about what shoots you take.
Yeah, that's true. And again, I think with this, what I do find regarding that is that I still want to make this scene mean something for me. I don't really want to have burnout at a younger age and just be like, I'm completely done, or I come in and I just get the money and I'm going. I don't know how long I'm going to be within this porn scene. Like, nobody knows what will happen, but I'm grateful that I'm able to still do something once a year, at least once a year. Like this year, I mean, other than the porn film festival, this year I actually I produced my first film, like a little short film. It just happened actually around the time of the porn film festival. So nice. I worked with a friend of mine and then this other performer, John Zeus, and we made a little first film. And it was great because it's been like, I've been talking about it for so long and then we just did it. But like, I think John Zeus was the one who kind of initiated it basically. So And then we came up with this idea and we just managed to make it work. So I'm very grateful about that. And there's certain times when I'm like, yeah, this is great. Now can we want to do more things? But you've got to be aware of your own energy. And obviously, you don't want to be like completely controlled by your emotions, because sometimes you got to put them to the side and just do the job. But there are other times where you're just like I said, I don't want to completely destroy this particular relationship that I have with pornography. Like, to go to a point where I'm just so done and I can't imagine working with another person on set again, and then be like, okay, if I'm gonna leave the scene, I want to leave it on a high. I don't want to leave it in the point where I'm like crawling over the finish line and being like, okay, I'm done. That doesn't feel good to me.
Yeah. Do you have any vision for like how long you might continue to do porn for? Like another 10 years until you're 65?
It depends on what. I just had a vision of me being a 65-year-old silver daddy.
You would be amazing. Like,
thank you. I think it's depends, really. I honestly was ready to transition out of doing porn this year, and it just didn't turn out that way, and I'm happy it didn't. But I would say if you asked me this question 5 years ago, I wouldn't have an answer, because I would have been like, yeah, porn till I die, what up? Whole life. But nowadays, I mean, if I would probably transition into something else, it'd probably be behind the camera. I don't see this as a stepping stone to something else. I don't see this as a way to come in and just get my bag and go out. I feel like because I've been within a time where we didn't have the same sort of like visibility and opportunities as we do now. And there was this kind of strange divide between the consumer and the pornographer, in a sense of, you see a DVD and it'd be like, oh my God, I would love to work with this person. Before like social media became so instrumental in people's lives, there was like much more of a divide, I think. And it's not that it can't happen, but I think this also, to go back to the first question that we said, that's something that I've also taken on board as well. Like, I don't advertise so much in my personal life on social media as well. So that way I can keep certain things private.
Which is more sustainable. That seems to be a theme with you, is like understanding how to make this work sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I don't know. I don't really have a inspiration date that's hanging in the air, like slowly coming down. When it happens, it happens. Like I said, I think the next transition will probably be to go behind the camera and work in a different way.
Do you want to do more producing and maybe like some directing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be down to do that. I think it'll be great to do more directing or more producing. I've had the chance to direct on stage already as a theatre director, which has been fantastic. And I think the transition to that could be really lovely. I also know how difficult it is to take that particular role, because obviously there's an oversaturation in pornography at the moment. And I think it's always been a highly competitive industry, but I think more so in terms of the performers. And I'm grateful that I had the position that I have. And I think there's times when I've had to remind myself that I've gotten this far and I have a very illustrious back catalogue. And I don't think I could do it now the same way as I did it back then. I think it'll be very different. And I think also in regards to how porn is consumed in terms of like tube sites and so on, I wouldn't know how to make a company that's like a sustainable company, for example. Like, how would you manage to make a company that is not only going on for certain years, but also making enough money to actually pay people and also pay yourself? There's a lot of hurdles and obstacles that could definitely arise with that.
Yeah, it's very difficult to break into if you want to have your own porn company and do things the way you want to. Do you have like a dream or a vision for the type of porn that you want to make as a producer or a director? Is there a kind of like an overarching theme with the type of films you want to create, or is it just more like case by case the things you want to do?
Yeah, I think it would be in a case by case situation. I think there's a lot of overlapping things when it comes to my own performance in the burlesque scene, which I would love to implement in my own work. But then I don't know, after that, there'll probably come a point where I'm like, okay, but what's next? Because then it might just be a bit too samey.
Yeah, I guess I was pushing the envelope. Something we haven't touched on yet is the topic of racism in porn, which is a massive thing in mainstream porn. From my understanding, less so in queer indie productions. But this is also something that I discovered when I started working in porn and have learned more about recently, is just how fetishized Black men are in mainstream porn. Interracial porn is one of the most popular categories of porn, and interracial porn exclusively refers to a Black man fucking a white woman, or it can also be like a Hispanic or an Asian woman. They just have to be white enough. They have to have light enough skin. And it's reverse interracial when it's a white man fucking a Black woman. It's like such clear, distinct racism. Yeah. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's entire companies like Black, for example, where these companies, all they do is create films of Black men fucking white women. And that's the entire concept. And I know you've only done a little bit of mainstream porn. And like I said, I would hope that there's a lot less racism in indie and queer productions, but I'm sure it still happens. What has your experience been with that?
I think the easiest point that I could possibly bring up about this is payment. This has happened before in that I've been paid less than white performers because the white performer may be like, I always thought it was a case of, okay, the white performers maybe has worked with them before or so on. But I remember that happened with one ethical porn company where I was paid less than the other white performer. And that was, I don't know, I think I'm not going to like turn around and be like, no, I've like had a great time and it doesn't exist for me. This is something that doesn't just stick with the porn companies, but it also sticks to the consumers as well. And the term ABC, for example, I've had people, or I've had companies, when they write their descriptions about certain scenes I've been in, they write me in a way that's typical of how they see a Black performer, in the sense that they're oversexed and they are like this epitome of hyper-masculine type of energy. And yeah, and then he grabs his big, and it's like,
fetishization.
Yeah, exactly. It's fetishization, and it's not discussing me, but it's not describing who I am. And that's happened to me, of course, a lot of times. And it's very difficult as a porn performer to toe the line between exploitation and agency, because I mean, you're working within a scene in which people basically generally assume that you are being exploited. So as a Black performer trying to have not only my own autonomy when it comes to working within this industry, I also have to be aware that when it comes to my own work, for example, you are playing around with this particular type of like balance of, okay, yeah, I'm using my image for a particular type of thing, but also I don't want to like self-exploit myself as like other companies may do to me. I had people on set say some positive racism stuff like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a bit of chocolate today. That's been said to me.
Like performers you're about to work with say that on set? That's...
Yeah, and I think there have been times where I've literally had to blank it out of my brain and be like, okay, that never happened. I'm going into the scene. I'm going to work with this person. I need to do this job. So yeah, it happens from either, yeah, I've even had performers outside of scenes be like, oh yeah, go to Budapest or go to Prague because we're looking for Black performers because like we really need Black performers. And I think you'd be really great if you go there and actually do the work. Because like, you know, I feel like they say it in the way that they're trying to help, but it doesn't feel like it's helping. It just feels, okay, you're going to tell me to go and exploit myself in this particular way. And I'm very particular about my image, which is also another thing about sustainability as well, because I don't want to be in a situation where my image then gets seen in this particular light. And I think that's also why for a long time, as well as all the other fucking shit that went with the mainstream scene for me, I've always been like a bit apprehensive about that because I didn't want to be like seen in that particular way. I don't want to be seen as a sexed up Black performer. And again, it's not to say that the mainstream scene is like evil for this and everything else. It's just the way that people try to sell their work because they want to make the money. But there have been a lot of scenes where I've suffered like racism in a way that's been seen as, yeah, like it's meant to be positive. Like I said, I like you. I think you're cool. Or they just say things without actually knowing me. Or consumers say things. And like I told you before, I want to see like Bishop like getting fucked because this and this. And I'm like, okay, so you want to see me in a role that is criticized and perhaps in your eyes emasculated. So there's a lot of it. And I feel that as a result, you then get dehumanized.
Yeah, because people see you as a fetish, like as a Black person or as a Black cock. Like even the term BBC, that I just think it's one of the most reductive terms in porn.
Yeah, but no, white men are using this. And
I know now.
BWC. I'm like,
white men have
how can you appropriate the term that you've thrown over to us and then been like, yeah, BBC? Well, I got a BWC.
Yeah, my BWC is better than your BBC. It's ridiculous, but even when you just compare it to other common porn terms, like MILF, for example. MILF is like, okay, talking about a mother. I feel like that's much more talking about an entire person versus BBC, which is like big black cock. It's literally just about your cock. It's so inherently objectifying.
Yeah, of course.
It's spoken about.
Yeah, a lot of actors have definitely spoken out about this. I've spoken out about this in the past. I think there are companies that like keep this in mind and really try to be aware of like how they're presenting other performers. And then the other side, you still have performers who, or even you have like scripts. I mean, our favorite film, which basically didn't understand how. And sometimes it may just be like something that like is just forgotten because the script isn't necessarily made for you, but then you end up jumping in there and then they don't really change something because they're just like, they don't think about it.
Yeah.
Like the thought of some Black person coming out of a ditch completely covered in mud may not elicit to them like feelings of racism because they don't have that perspective, because they've never seen that sort of perspective. They've never looked outside of themselves and realized that, oh, actually, could what I'm making be perceived as racist to other people?
Yeah, let's think about the context that we exist in. To not just fall out of a coconut tree. You exist in the context.
Yes. I like where you did that.
The next porn film was going to be a coconut tree scene once.
Oh, no.
But also linking back to what you were talking about earlier with biphobia in porn, I think it's a lot to walk onto set. You know, you were talking sometimes how you go into sets maybe having this fear that people aren't going to want to work with you when they find out that you also perform with men. And then also that combined with being a person of color, and yeah, it seems like a lot to me.
Yeah, like I said, I think I was maybe a bit too far ahead of my time when I first started to go into the scene, because these things were already on my mind. And it's something that you can try and fight for sure. And I guess everyone has a different ways of fighting. Or I didn't necessarily accept it, but I acknowledged it. I acknowledged that this will be a thing that will definitely come up and it will happen. And I've been very fortunate to have worked with people who, for example, a lot of performers who I've worked with before in the past, we end up being friends, so then we end up like getting opportunities to work together again with each other, or people who are completely like aware, like basically aware of the situation, or maybe self-aware is a better way of saying it, or just really down to earth. So I've been very fortunate to, maybe because of my sexuality, or maybe because of they see something that they don't really like. Most of these performers, they just hide from me. So they don't end up working with me in the end. And I'm like, okay, that's totally fine. I guess that already puts the people who I know I'm going to have problems with off of me. And then the people who still are around, then we just shoot something. So it's great. But yeah, I mean, it's very, I don't think you have enough time in your podcast to actually really go into the depths of this without actually going really deep into the issues or the problematic issues that happen. Because if on one hand, if it's not your race, then it's definitely your sexuality. And I've noticed you can always tell when you look at somebody, when you're talking to somebody and then you mention that you're bisexual, and then you can see there's a change, there's a shift. And it's happened recently with somebody, and I was like, okay, well, you know what? That's totally fine. I thought we'll pass this, but you know, it's not.
That's crazy. Was it somebody in the industry?
Yeah. But like, it was, I wasn't even taking it personally. I was just like, okay, well, that's fine. This person is predominantly straight, and that's what they are.
But I'm sure this person doesn't have a problem with bi woman. And it's
of course, there's a double standard. Yeah. But again, I think it makes it easier for me to focus on my own piece as opposed to getting caught up with others. I think this is also then as a consequence of being in the scene for so long that you end up like knowing how to navigate it in a way that like gives you the most peace, as opposed to being caught up by it and then starting something and then just all carrying that particular energy with you and not really wanting to shoot with anybody because you can't trust anybody.
I think I've seen just from afar on social media other performers get burnt out by getting into that, which is a totally understandable reaction to have.
Yeah, of course. And I guess it's difficult because you're in situations where if you're on social media, perhaps other performers may get bumped more than you, or other images of people will be bumped more than other types of images. For example, a certain body type, a certain like skin color will probably be like bumped higher than somebody who is a different type of sexuality. Or if we're going to say straight up, basically white men or white women who are like a particular conventional and attractive body type will be like higher than somebody who's like queer, fat, trans, and so on, because that's how the algorithm works, because it's basically operated with this idea that's better and this is other. When you've been in a situation where you've always been othered, it's unsurprising when that happens, but you see it so much that it's difficult to explain to somebody who doesn't have that sort of viewpoint. Okay, you try to explain it and then people are like, yeah, but you got to try harder. Oh, but you got to promote your work like this. Oh, but you got to do it like this. And it's, yeah, but I've been doing that and I've got no response because there's a certain default that basically like exists in people's minds, and the default is sometimes white and straight.
Yeah, and you're not working with the same baseline that a white straight person has. It's very different. Have you been able to find community with other porn performers who are similar to you, or has that been difficult? Is it rare to find other performers?
You find performers that end up being your friends and being very close to you. I think the term community within this particular demographic is something that can be performative. I used to really believe in this idea of community, and I think in some ways there can be the sense of community, and in other ways this community is just basically seen as a little bit facade. Because what does community actually mean to a person? You can say community that everybody knows what the word means, but how does that then represent, or how does that translate for people?
What does it mean in a tangible way? Like, how does it actually affect your life? Yeah, because community can end up being like people you take pictures with for social media.
Yeah.
But it should be something deeper than that.
Yeah, I think like, especially within these like last how many fucking years, like what's important is how do we come in solidarity with each other in a way that like doesn't have this sense of, I mean, a really fantastic example of this is the recent election. Like the recent election and the performers who voted for that person. And to me, that's something that is highly inconceivable to think about, because I'm like, okay, but then this for me signals that it isn't a community.
Yeah, the fact that there are sex workers who voted for Donald Trump, and we talk about sex workers being in a community and how we support each other, but if you're voting for someone who has plans to actively harm that community,
right?
You're actually not really part of the community, I think.
Yeah, I think that's also the thing that I've tried to be, or tried to, well, I can't really understand it. You would think that because you work in an industry that has been heavily stigmatized for so long, that you would understand that you don't want to use somebody who would then actively go out of their way to completely ban your income and completely gut the industry in such a way. And we can say things like, oh yeah, but that's not right, and that's not going to happen. I'm like, literally Foster and Sister have happened. Mm-hmm. And if Foster and Sister have happened before, what makes you think there will be another thing that will then go out of its way? You have Exodus Cry, who have tried to bring down like porn sites like X videos or Pornhub and so forth. But what's going to happen next, and how is that then going to affect like your work? We could probably go to another site that will like offer or promise that they will offer security or sanctuary, but then something will happen and that site will go down. And we've had it with Backpage, we've had it with Craigslist, we've had it with so many different sites, and we've had it with IndieBill, we've had it with CCBill, we've had it with so many different payment providers. It's no wonder why people either get burnt out because, okay, I don't want to continue fighting in this way. And I feel then this idea of community then becomes, again, a performative term.
Yeah, I think it is massively a performative performative term. What do you wish that people in the porn industry would do more to make it less performative? What do you think needs to be done to foster more community in the industry?
I wish I had the answer for that. I mean, from my side, I just try to be with the people that I know, because, of course, it's a very hyper-personalized workplace. You're working with your bodies, you're doing very intimate things with each other, and there can be connections that are formed, and there are connections that you may think are formed, but they're probably one-sided, and there may be nothing. There may be something that doesn't exist. I think once you are in the scene for a while, you will get to know the people that you actually want to have at any point by your side, and then you'll know the people to completely avoid.
Yeah, that makes sense. And besides the people that you have been able to find community with, what are your favorite things about being a porn performer? What makes you love doing this?
Other than traveling?
Like being flown out?
Well, I mean, I love being in front of the camera. That's a given. I wouldn't say I'm an exhibitionist as I used to be, but I was definitely one of them. And I was one of them, along with other people. I was definitely part of the exhibitionist scene way back when. No, but I mean, I like the fact that I get a chance to perform on camera, and also there have been situations where, or there have been scenes, and that I get to act a lot more, and I get to showcase a lot more of my personality and performance and so on. And that I just like to be stimulated. No pun intended. No pun intended. I like the fact that I can find stimulation. What? Are you 12? Of 12?
Yeah, I'm sure you're finding stimulation.
No. Okay. No, honestly, I really like a challenge. Of course, it's really lovely to travel around and to do different shoots and to get the opportunity to work with like really great people, sometimes like really beautiful people. And like I said, I really like certain plots or themes or scripts and stuff. So it's nice to do something that challenges me and pushes me out of my comfort zone, basically. And yeah, I mean, I realized that, I mean, my health in terms of working out, like going to the gym, like 3 times or 4 times a week, or like doing something that's body focused, even if I smoke or I drink or something, like I still try to be on top of that. So it's pretty much tied into my work, basically, that, yeah, you want to look good, but that also you want to feel good as well. So I like the fact that like I get a chance to focus on taking care of myself and also trying to be as presentable as I can. And yeah, like that gives me a sense of purpose.
My last question for you is, how do you hope or dream for porn to change positively going forward?
Oh, that's such a big last question.
You can take your time. You can be a 15-minute last question.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of different things, but I could try to pull out from the sky and put into my mouth to say. It would be good if the industry was seen as a respectable and profitable industry, and that it wasn't seen as a sort of like thing that's hidden away in some sort of like dark crevice of someone's mind, but instead given the respect that it deserves because it's been here for a long time. It would be great if it could be respected as any other form of medium, and as a result, there could be more money that's been pumped into it, which they can also pay performers better and also take care of them. It could be great if there's also a union that can really support and protect performers from bad working conditions when there are bad working conditions, and said directors would then be reprimanded and penalized as a result. It would be good if women, female-bodied and BPOC performers can also be respected in the same way as cis, straight performers are, and given the opportunity to actually be seen. It'd be great to see more diverse bodies And sometimes, I mean, of course, we're working within a fantasy medium, so like everyone's fantasy is very different, but there's also a really big pull for, as you mentioned before, realism in some way. I know there's a lot more like couples working in this industry, and I think that's like very fascinating to watch. I think it's also very ambitious and sometimes a little bit dangerous for some couples. I'm not saying this for everybody, but it's fascinating that that's the next step forward. And I feel it feels like there is more of a leaning towards that more real type of, not just like boy or girl next door, but person I met at the bar energy. So I feel like porn's not going to go away, basically. I feel like for every time you try to put, or every time porn seems to be like overplayed or overused, there's going to be something else that pops into the psyche of the consumer that then they want to see, and then that will be shown. As long as we have desires and as long as we have fantasies, there'll always be porn.
I agree with that. Thanks so much for sharing all of that, and thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you so much.
It's been a real insightful conversation. Where should people follow you if they want to keep up with you? What platforms are best for them to look on?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram as the Bishop Black 3000. I am on Blue Sky, also as the Bishop Black 3000. I am on Twitter, but so find me still there at It's Bishop Black. And then for all my naughty content, you can find me at OnlyFans at the Bishop Black 3000.
Perfect. I'll link your social media and everything down below as well, so people can click on that.
Thank you so much.
All right. My name is Lucy Huxley. I'm a whore, and thank you for joining us in my bedroom.